somewhat knowledgeable about the stuff they're voting on or making decisions on, but that's just how the cookie crumbles.
Well, that's just how it's been set up. I mean, it's a whole bunch of people to kind of look at and say, well, why is this way? But
right.
That's, I guess, the beauty of our country is everybody can kind of...
But that also can tie into this, is that they ask these questions and no one can answer it for them.
Right.
So that's what we're here to do.
That's what we want to do,
I'm all for people from non-agricultural backgrounds having a place in agriculture as long as they're at least willing to learn about it or looking for the information about it.
Just like with anything, you don't want people talking about something they don't know about.
Right. Like if people are like willingly like against, like they're like, like I'm completely against agriculture, I'm going to vote on every way to stop it, and like somebody like like my podcast or other ag podcasters out there go to them and say, hey, well how about we have a conversation about this and maybe we can both learn something from it, and they say no, agriculture needs to die. Well, at that point, that person does not need to be making decisions in that category because they're not willing to learn about it.
The problem is those people still can, though.
Right, and that's the dangerous part about it. Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and in today's episode we're having another pretty general ag conversation with my roommates, of all people. I'll allow them to introduce themselves, but first off we have Aaron and Coultin here. So guys, let the kind audience know who you are.
You want me to go? Sure. My name is Coultin Gist. I am majoring in plant science and minoring in enology, and I really like wine. I'm working at the Fresno State Winery right now.
Okay, and my name is Aaron Oppedyk. I'm 22 years old. I'm actually majoring in business administration with an emphasis in management, and I have also completed my minor in Spanish as well. I do come from a extensive ag background. I lived on a dairy for 10 years, and I worked there for 2, and I really love cars and computers.
Very nice. So, as Aaron just mentioned there, all three of us are from Tulare. We grew up around animals and livestock, and I keep saying livestock, but I mean, Coultin, you didn't exactly grow up around livestock.
No, I didn't.
Agriculture in general, whether it be livestock or crops or anything in that category. So we all have a tangential understanding of agriculture, but it's the specifics that kind of vary. Obviously Coultin's more on the plant science side of things, I'm more on the animal science side of things, and Aaron's just curious.
Yeah, I got a little bit of both. I mean, more cows than anything. My dad was a herdsman, so I was always around cows and things like that. But obviously I got to see the rotation of crops. And literally in my backyard, we had alfalfa, corn, and all kinds of that stuff. So
yeah, so. Interesting experiences from all three of us, but that kind of starts us off on, I think, a good starting point, which is Tulare agriculture. We are all very passionate about our hometown that we affectionately call Cowtown, because the massive amount of dairies that surround the place, and now it's dairies and trees is pretty much all you'll see. But there is an issue we've been seeing in Tulare over the past few years, and it's been happening longer than that, but this is as long as we've been aware of it, that we really want to highlight today. That being the amount of agricultural land that's being converted into urban land.
Which worries me very much so. And this topic got started because I asked Brennan, I'm like, is there a way that we can turn that land that was just dirt, that it's just dirt, or land that has, old buildings that aren't used, or, buildings that may not be used in the future, can we turn that back into land? Because I don't like coming home and seeing, a whole other neighborhood built, which, yeah, it's good because people can live there, but it's like, one day it may, we may need to turn that back into farmland, and how will we do that? It's sad to see my hometown go from just being a lot of field and agriculture to just, being urbanized. Right. So I don't, I always wanted to know more about that.
Yeah. So I'll kind of have Coultin help me with this because you're more versed in soil science and that sort of thing. And so agricultural land being unable to be used is mostly a soil science issue because we see, when soil, at least the topsoil of particular land is kind of destroyed by foundation of buildings, makes it a little hard to plant anything there.
Yeah, it does. The almost the most fascinating thing that I learned in soils is soil is alive. It really is. There's more things living in the soil in just one scoop of the hand than you could even think of. There's so much bacteria and worms, and you probably won't get a rodent in that handful, but those rodents even make a huge difference in the soil. They open up air pockets in the soil that allow oxygen in, and obviously plants need oxygen and carbon dioxide, nitrogen. They need everything that they could get. But it opens up those air passages for water to get in there too. And when those air pockets aren't available, it can't retain water, and the plant eventually dies.
Right. And, and to your point, I think that's a big part of ag that a lot of people tend to forget about is that, really doesn't matter what kind of ag you're talking about. It all depends on that soil. That soil is foundational to everything, functioning and working properly.
Absolutely.
Because, like you said, that soil is alive, and it's not just alive, but it's home to a lot of other living things that kind of need to all work together for us to have the food that we have. This is a topic that we talked about briefly in other episodes, but we really want to dive a bit more into this because it's a topic that hits very close to home for us. I mean, how many new buildings or restaurants have we seen in Tulare in the past, 2 years?
Oh, I've seen it change drastically in the last, 3 to 4.
Yeah.
And they're putting in a new overpass, and they took out the almond trees that were right next door.
Oh, really? I didn't even
Yeah, it was
know about
on, J Street.
Oh, right,
That one that's illegal. It went on the fast.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they bought the land next to it, and they took out.
Is that how they're going to fix
Yeah,
it? No.
they took out all
That's
the trees.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I see, it's like one of those things, it's like I see why they're doing these things. It's not like they're just saying, let's kill ag, but the problem is, even though it's not intentional, it's still doing the same thing as if it were. And so, I think the main thing I want to know is how are we going to turn that soil back into viable soil for us to use? Because I believe I've talked to Brennan before, and he has told me that soil cannot be used anymore once it's built over. So how do we turn it back?
I'm just confused on, because you know where that old winery was? Right next to Target.
Yes.
Yeah. There's nothing going on there.
Right.
They always say, oh, we're going to put houses there. I mean, since we went to elementary school.
Right.
Which place again?
Right next to the old winery.
Oh, yeah.
Sundale. I think there's a Dutch Bros there now.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean...
Oh, yeah, they added a little Dutch Bros there. They actually just tore out the winery. It's gone.
Yeah, I know. So, why not you make the houses there instead of on Prosperity? Where, oh God. Yeah, Prosperity, right? That's where the new neighborhood's going. That...
Or are you talking about on Cartmill?
Or Cartmill, not Prosperity.
Yeah, it's right there. They just got rid of all of that.
All of that.
Right.
I'm like, okay, you couldn't have just used soil that was not going to be used for agriculture and built on top of it. That would have been completely fine. No, you had to tear out trees that were feeding people to put more people in this town.
Yeah, which goes to answer Aaron's question. I think that there's kind of a two-part, answered here. The first part is kind of talking about, agricultural land and urban land development and kind of how that works, because kind of to Coultin's point, there's a fair way to use land for urban development. Like obviously we have a bunch of empty lots in Tulare that are surrounded by buildings. You're not gonna be able to farm those anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't spray them. That soil is probably not super suitable for growing stuff. It's not. You're not just gonna have a half acre, little crop garden in the middle of town. So, but we're, again, like you said, we're not using that land. I mean, we are to some degree, like where Canes and In-N-Out is, that's where, that kind of stuff is understandable. Why they built the two most popular restaurants of all time right next to each other in the same month will never make sense to me, but that's beside the point.
Well, I mean, Fresno also did that.
Yeah,
with the In-N-Out and Chick-fil-A.
This is true.
Yeah. But I mean, you make a good point. I mean, obviously, that land was kind of not viable for, you wouldn't see a cornfield right there.
Right.
That's fine. I mean, personally, I would just rather see it green. But,
Yeah.
I mean, or put something that's nature-wise, but I get it. I that's fine. I wasn't mad at that.
No.
I was mainly sad about the Cartmill neighborhood, which, I'm glad people can live there, but it's, it was a field that's gone.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would even go as far to say that it's not necessarily that like we're against urban development by any means. It's a matter of converting usable and very valuable agricultural land into urban development when we have other spaces that we could be doing that with. And, to Aaron's point, I think that there's some lots, in Tulare or just in urban areas in general that are not being used that, like, like you said, they're saying they're going to build something there forever and they never do. Why aren't we using that for like a community garden or something like that, or some kind of like active space just to keep the soil working? Because to answer your question about soil regeneration and being able to use that soil again, it takes, and correct me if I'm wrong, soil science boy, but it takes anywhere from like 300 to 500 years for just like an inch of topsoil.
Our last time, lifetime,
right? And probably the lifetime of Tulare, if we're being honest. I mean, like our country is only what.
378 years old, or
I can't remember, almost 300 years old, just by itself. So I mean, like the soil that they built the earliest settlements on probably is not even ripe enough to use again yet. So it's like, what are the chances that we're ever going to be able to see that soil used again?
Yeah.
But it's the best way to revive soil, just from what we've seen so far, and practices and technology are evolving all the time.
Of course.
But just working it and like trying to get some of that biological life to come back, getting some of those ecosystems kind of rebuilt, even if it has to do with transplanting soil in, or some kind of like almost like a blood transfusion, but with soil and microbiomes.
Right.
I could give you a great example on that.
Okay.
When Mount St. Helen blew, the scientists knew it was going to go.
Yeah.
Right? And they started coming up with these theories, and scientists had a heyday trying to. They were almost so excited to watch it blow because they wanted to see what the ecosystem would do. And they were like, "Oh, it's going to take 1,000 years. The dust is going to cover the soil, or the ash. It's going to cover the soil, and it's not going to. If a plant sprouts, it's going to be covered in the ash, and it can't get the correct sunlight." Well, they were wrong.
Wow.
It actually took. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but it was less than 100 years. I didn't think I would be talking about this right now. Right? So I didn't do any research on it, but I can tell you for a fact it happened faster than what they expected it to happen.
Well, I know Mount St. Helens blew in like the 80s or late 70s, early 80s. I thought it was like 80 something. And I'm pretty sure from what I've seen modern pictures, it doesn't look like the desolate wasteland they thought.
No,
right?
absolutely not.
Yeah,
1980.
So I mean, what it's been? That was 42 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's you still see trees now.
Yeah. It was like way quicker than anything they've ever seen before. It was like 5 years later they saw a deer back on that land. It was like, why are you back? There's no trees, no plant life, nothing. But the fertilization from the feces and created air pockets in the ash, and that encouraged plant life, and it just revolutionized what we thought soil was.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so could possibly the same thing happen even in Tulare, right?
And I was getting to that. I mean, it's I can't say a volcano exploding is the same as putting a building on it and tearing it down, but that just goes to show you that we don't know everything about soil.
Oh yeah,
soil's a mystery.
Yeah.
So there can be something, but we're just not doing enough research on it.
Well,
because usually when you build something, it's meant to stay.
So according to a couple articles here, it seems like the first 20 years after the eruption, like the environment almost snapped back immediately.
Exactly.
But after those 20 years, it started to kind of plateau a little bit, and we're almost like you said, 42 years later, we're still kind of seeing recovery, but at a slower pace. So to your point, like the environment has this remarkable flexibility with being able to just snap back into place. Now, obviously, not everything is going to be like that. We've seen like Chernobyl when that sort of thing happened, and it takes way longer than we have time for that stuff to recover. But to say that we're never going to be able to revive the soil that has been developed upon is not a very optimistic statement. Like we
never want to say never,
right? But it's like you said, soil is such a unique concept for, especially in modern agricultural science, because if you look way back to early civilizations, they had it figured out. There's some of the earliest, I think way back in Mesopotamia, some of the earliest examples of language they could find talked about soil. It was one of the first writings they ever did. Soil was essential to every civilization, and they knew that. I don't know at what point we kind of lost that information, but now we're starting to figure it out again. Soil scientists are like, oh, what have we been doing killing the soil all these years? That's what's killing us. Right. We need to fix the soil, and the soil will fix us.
Oh, you're talking about the Dust Bowl?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's
that was kind of the wake-up call.
Yeah.
For a lot of farmers.
Right. And so now, we're in this modern age of agriculture, and I talk on the podcast all the time about this kind of new revolution that we're getting to witness, which is really cool. Technically, and my listeners know, but I argue that we're witnessing actually two separate agricultural revolutions at the same time, but they're both benefiting the same cause. So those two revolutions being the regenerative revolution and the automated revolution. So we're seeing ag get more efficient, more technologically advanced, and have more automation going involved. But our methods are getting more regenerative. We're having a better understanding of how the ecosystems work and how to regenerate some of what the damage we've caused has been, and we're figuring out ways to improve our methods that improve our yields without having to have an excessive amount of chemicals on them, which is, so we're almost seeing like the green revolution was useful, but now we don't need it anymore. We're finding ways to make stuff grow without the need of excessive fertilizers or without the need of excessive pesticides, mostly through genetic modification along with our improved, health of, consciousness about soil health and all that kind of stuff. But I kind of want to transition into that idea of like these new innovations in ag are what I think might be the solution to our problem in Tulare, getting rid of all this usable soil.
Right.
So I think the conversation kind of has to be like, okay, well, we need to designate what areas of Tulare we want to restore and start implementing some of these methods, some of these technologies, and we might be able to actually see some kind of saving grace there if possible.
Well, that's an interesting thing is we have to find out, which places are we going to take out and why. Why does this certain place deserve to be taken out versus this one? Or, it's I think there would be a lot of, other issues in addition to just, knowing how to regenerate the soil. Someone owns that land, or maybe it's someone's, there's some old house that for some reason someone doesn't want to get rid of, or, there's other interesting questions that poses. But,
sure.
I agree that it's definitely an agricultural technical problem, and we have to figure out, what do we know about soil and how do we put life back into it? What do we know about how those little microbiomes affect, plant growth and things like that? We need to know more about
like I
that.
said before, we don't have any studies on it.
Right. Well, yeah, it's
at least
something...
ones that I don't know of. I'm not the soil science expert, of course.
Right.
But I would think, I would imagine somebody must know something, right? I mean, I can't imagine that we don't have, any information at all about how to add new minerals and nutrients in the soil to make it to where something can grow. I mean, like you said, Mount St. Helens, it blew that whole area out completely, and stuff grew back. And how,
Yeah, and the thing is, like, we didn't even do anything about that. It just kind of figured it out itself.
Naturally.
So,
right. So I mean, I want to say it's definitely something we can do. I just don't know how to do it. And
I have some theories, and so one of the things I think we should do with the soil is start small.
Okay.
Like I said, there's been no studies on this, but just from what I know, we need to start small, start with the bacteria first. Then we go into the enzymes, worms, rodents, and work up from there. Try to get some air pockets back in that soil. And I know this is not regenerative farming, but tilling.
Yeah.
We got to get some form of oxygen into that soil, and that would mean turning the soil up.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I think to your point, like you said, it's not regenerative, but I think that tilling is something that is kind of like a black and white term in agriculture. Like people think like either you're tilling and you're destroying the soil, or you're not tilling and you're saving everyone. Like a lot of regenerative methods even have what's called low till as opposed to no till. They're not completely eradicating tilling, but they're doing it only when it's necessary. Only to mix things up and get new, like I said, oxygen and other minerals exposed that previously weren't there, because to some degree tilling is necessary. If you don't till, then you run the risk of it getting like that hard pan developing, and there's just not as much freedom to the oxygen flow and all that. Go ahead, Aaron.
I have a question real quick. So
Yes.
usually when there'll be like just this dead land, right? And then over time you'll see grass grow, or I've seen in cement, or at my job where I work at, we have a car wash. And in that car wash, sometimes you'll see like grass or weeds sprouting out of the concrete, right? So, how come grass can grow on seemingly dead land or in the middle of concrete, but then we can't grow major, big crops?
So Coultin probably has his own opinions about this, but
do.
I'll tell you my thoughts, and I'll let the actual expert on the subject let us know how it works. Coultin could correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think it is there are just certain plants that are more durable, I guess you could say, than others. Like corn is notoriously a crop that can grow anywhere because it's just like, it's so hard to kill corn.
Well, there's obviously a difference between grass though and corn. Like grass is a tiny, tiny organism,
but there are also think about like scavenger animals. They will find a way to live no matter where they are, like rats or your
cockroaches.
Your best friend cockroaches.
No, I hate those.
But you have certain life forms that will find any way to live, so they will, they'll find a way to survive on the smallest amount of nutrition possible. And I think that grass and weeds kind of have a way of doing that. If they find like a crack in the cement where there's just like this tiny bit of soil exposed, the soil might not be usable for crops, but it might have like an ounce of this nutrient that grass needs, and that's enough for it to stay alive for however long. Correct me if I'm wrong, plant professor.
You basically got it.
Okay.
So two things. One, grass is actually a weed, but we make it look good.
Oh,
Nice.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Weeds technically are plants that repropriate where you don't want them to. technically.
Right.
So grass can repropriate in concrete. It just like dandelions, the wind goes and it just takes them wherever they want. Those weeds that hang on to the fur of dogs when they lay on it, or stickers, they just go wherever they want. But almonds or anything else that isn't a weed, we could actually take that and plant it wherever we want it. That's the difference.
Right.
And 2, grass is a monocot.
Yep, I was just about to mention that. Monocots typically are more resilient, right?
Yes,
I believe
they're more
they came
resilient
before
because-
dicots, too.
Yes, they were one of the first organisms or plant organisms to live on Earth. Behind, it was grass then ferns. But so they have a lot of experience on this land, and they're a lot less complex. I mean, you could.
You have a straight vascular system inside of them instead of all these complex different, cork, cambium, and all that. It's just grass.
Somebody's been listening.
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit.
I mean, grass is the essence of this. There's nothing special about it. This is all I need to survive. That's it.
And even then, it's still complicated when you really get down into it.
Yeah.
But that's a topic for another time.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents.
Well, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. Yeah, no. I mean, I think that opened me up to, that question I asked of, well, why can this live here opposed to something else, right? And that kind of gives me more of like, well, okay. I mean, it's not that the soil is completely dead, but maybe it just needs more to support bigger crops.
And then that actually raises a really solid point that I hadn't thought about, which is, weeds teach us a lot about our environment. It shows us that, like you said, like that soil may not be completely hopeless. It's just that it's missing something that we needed to have.
So what if we add that missing piece into it?
That is being talked about through the use of fertilizers and through the use of kind of like we were mentioning earlier, like transplanting soil. You almost like transfuse certain nutrients into the soil. Because I think one of the big issues with soil that kind of makes it hard to revive is not necessarily that it's completely deficient of all nutrients. It's that you don't have the microbiomes in there that help create new nutrients. It's you don't have that living organism aspect of the soil to keep everything moving properly. It's like the nutrients are in there, but they're like stuck. Like one plant might be able to pull them out, but once they're out, that's it. Like where are you gonna go next? It's like we watched WALL-E a couple weeks ago and we saw that just desert of a planet that was left over. There were no nutrients to pull out because all the soil was completely dead and there was nothing to keep it going. You know? And my theory is that that's due to the amount of stuff they built on top of the soil and they just never took care of it. But that's I did a whole episode on that already, so I'm not going to go into that. But no, I mean, I think that that paves the way for a conversation about like what. So yes, there's potential left in the soil that we can see. Obviously it can grow things of some level. We see weeds in those empty lots all the time. So there's something there. What do you think we need to do, or what are we already doing or working on that might be necessary to try to get that back to some level of viability?
Yeah.
You could, again, start small. Plant grass.
Yeah.
Plant, what's a nitrogen fixation plant?
Like clover?
Clover. Barley.
Yeah.
See, and I'm fine seeing that, if we get rid of some of these old, derelict houses that aren't being used anymore. Let's just say businesses, they eventually close down and they don't have something open on them for a long time. Hey, maybe plant something that looks a little nicer, instead of just having a concrete, broken thing. Obviously, that's a lot harder because you have a whole, building right there that could be rented out to someone. So it's going to be a tough conversation to talk about, why should we get rid of this for some grass,
right?
But I think when the time comes to it, eventually we're going to have to,
Yeah.
I think, especially in Tulare, if anyone were to say that in Tulare, like, should I remind you of our nickname?
Right.
We are the agriculture capital of the world.
Right.
Easier done here than somewhere else.
Yeah.
A city, and we're the agriculture capital of the world. Okay.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, it's not going to be an easy task by any means, but nothing ever is in agriculture. That's kind of the name of the game. I actually just did an episode with a buddy of mine last week, and we talked about how agriculture kind of has this like constant need to struggle. Like for some reason, those in agriculture have to constantly be in pain. It's very strange, but it's how we are.
Not to bring this up too soon, but that's wine grapes.
Yeah, well,
literally the best grapes struggle. That's why if you look up your favorite place, Chateauneuf du Pape, they plant on rocks.
Yeah. I mean,
to
I would argue
struggle
that
to plant.
I like LXV a little better, but you
Oh
know.
my god! What now? Now what is this, a commercial?
Yes, it is. Hey, I gotta talk about my favorite winery.
Hey, if you guys can get me a sponsorship from a winery, then by all means.
Fresno State Winery.
Yeah, I can only kind of put Enterprise on here. So,
Oh my god.
oh, renters of Enterprise rent a car.
But no, but I mean, like, like we're talking about, like the potential for bringing back some of that dead soil. And again, this we talk about this with Tulare because it's near and dear to our hearts, but this could be applicable almost anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that Coultin's right. It's going to require a lot of small steps in the right direction instead of just a massive leap to we're going to fix everything at once, because that's not possible.
Like with the Mount St. Helens thing, nature does take its course,
right?
But what I would be trying to do is try to speed that up.
Yeah, give it a little push.
Right,
Give it a
and
little
I think
push.
it's possible.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that makes it the most possible is our advancements with what we figured out so far about soil and about biotechnology and some of the newer crop-based technologies that we've discovered. I mean, we talked about nitrogen fixers, and other crops that help kind of regenerate soil as it grows. We're finding ways to implement those traits into already existing crops that would typically be leachers are now regenerators.
Right.
We have genetically modified crops that can now, instead of sucking all the nitrogen out of the soil, they can maybe they take a little bit, but now they add a little bit back more in. Or, we have drought resistant crops that aren't going to suck all of the water out of the soil at once. Like having, it's kind of ironic, we get blamed all the time for our crops sucking everything out of the soil. The crops are the one doing it. So why don't we just make a crop that doesn't do that anymore? And we're finding ways to do that. And, so like I said, between new technology and advanced methods, we're finding better ways to improve our relationship with the environment and also the efficiency of our crops in that situation.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think Tulare right now, and well, we'll talk about mainly Tulare right now. I mean, we've had we're definitely getting more people here, but I think when I was born in '99, it was 39,000 people. Now we have like around 65,000, so it's about doubled in the last 22 years. I mean, which is not that's a decent amount, but I mean, I don't think it'll ever become something like Fresno, where it's just this. In Fresno's not even big compared to LA, right? But
Right.
I don't think we need to worry about it completely becoming a concrete jungle or anything like that.
No.
But I'm just curious where they're going to take more of it next, right? I mean, to the east of what is it, Mooney and Prosperity, right? That's all field and dairies, right? So they're going to build out there, or they're going to build north where there's the same thing, or about all the way west where there is the same thing. South, it's the same thing. So how they're just going to destroy, crops? They're going to destroy fields. What are they going to do? And I don't know.
I think they're going to slowly start bridging Visalia and Tulare. I mean, that's where I see a lot of the expansion going. I mean, there's a lot of it happening in the south right now, kind of like Mission Oak area. There's a ton of expansion over there.
Took out cotton fields. I saw it.
Yep. No, that cotton field's gone. They've built the new apartments right there. They're looking at the trees in that area. I hope they don't look at the trees much longer in that area. But no, I think it's it's one of those things that it doesn't seem that big of a deal right now because it's happening slowly. But I mean,
I see it.
Right. And as we've learned, we've been away from Tulare, long term for a year and a half now, almost 2 years now. And every time we go back, it seems like there's a new building or there's a new part of the town that was that used to be a field. I remember when I took my driver's test, all those years ago. I say it a long time ago, but it was 4 years ago for me. But I remember when I took my driver's training, the guy that took me around, we went through Del Lago, and he was like, "Man, I remember when these were all vineyards." And I was like, "I wasn't alive when they were still vineyards." And he's like, "Yeah, they were, but they've changed a lot since then." Just learning about there are kids who are going to grow up thinking that that's just a normal part of Tulare when we know that is definitely not how Tulare used to be.
That's how I was with the Tulare COS campus. Because I used to live out there at River Bend Dairy, and it used to just be field right there. And then I remember when they built over it, and I was like, oh, dang, they turned that into a school, which is obviously, I think it's good because it's an ag school.
Right, it gives back to the actual.
Yeah, I mean, so that something like that I'm fine with.
Sure.
Okay, and it's still very country out there and ag oriented, but I'd be mad if they turned that into a Target.
Yes,
or
I would
something.
too.
I'm like, really, right there.
Right.
But I think maybe we should, we can't expect entirely to, cut out urbanization because people aren't going to stop coming. But, what if we look at vertical farming or, like I said earlier, turning old properties that aren't being used into something else? I know plenty of areas where it's just old buildings that don't do anything for years, right? So, someone could build something into it, but well, I mean, I'd rather it do something else than just sit there. So
Right. No, and I like your comment about vertical farming. That's actually something that I covered. By the time this episode comes out, it's going to be a while ago. It was back in December when the episode came out. But vertical farming is something that has a lot of potential to do a lot of good. It'll never, fully replace conventional agriculture. Obviously, it just doesn't have the sustainability for it, but it does supplement it fairly well. It adds some level of okay, well, if we don't have land, at least we have this.
Well, you know who's doing that very well?
Who's that?
The Dutch.
Oh boy,
They're doing that very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got they install purple light, so the white light that we have, because it takes out the green color. So they turn those on at night, and so the plant's still getting its proper nutrients, like everything, like normal sunlight.
Yeah.
Except without the green, because the plant doesn't absorb green.
Right.
And that purple light also costs less. So they're experimenting with a lot of stuff.
Wow.
And it's incredible the stuff that they're doing. So I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a thing fairly soon.
Yeah.
Or a good comment I want to mention is I know it's in Japan or China, they're starting to add agriculture into buildings.
Yes.
So they're starting to put many little forests on the side of buildings or on top of them.
Yep, you have rooftop gardens and you have
which I think they should totally do.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think it's a little bit harder in Tulare, for example, because we don't have a ton of multi-story buildings that you can just do that on. But in areas where where we need that, then I definitely think it could be incorporated. I could see it in Fresno. I could see it in I make this joke all the time. Fresno County is the top ag county in the world, 3rd year in a row, and Fresno as a city has the least ag of the entire county. It has so much potential for ag, and it just does not take advantage of it all. Besides Fresno State, but that's about it.
Oh yeah.
Surprised it wasn't Tulare County, actually.
I am too, but I think it's just size.
Oh yeah, Fresno County is a lot bigger.
Fresno County is just huge, and it has so many different there's over 300 crops in Fresno County alone. 300 types of crops.
Yeah.
The top 10 make up well over it's 98% of the profit comes from the top 10, but it's still I can't remember the numbers now. I just wrote a story about this 2 weeks ago, but no, it's I think that as we work towards more sustainable solutions, we're going to find some of those technologies like vertical farming and rooftop gardens finding their way into some of our areas, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the more
especially with those that plot of land like we talked about that can be farmed on. Well, shit, put a building in there and plant some stuff in it.
Yeah, turn into a vertical farming operation or something.
No difference for me.
Yeah, or we could. Well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, or even at the very least, so you guys remember the summer school in Tulare, right by the Target, is in the Target parking lot.
Oh yeah,
I can't remember what it was called now.
It's something weird. It was Kids for Life or whatever.
Well, it was Kids for Life, and there was another name it went by. It was Crescent something.
Crescent View?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I can't remember. I went there once because I took a summer school class, so I didn't have to take government or econ during my senior year, so I got it out of the way early. And while I was there, they learned about a lot of the ag ed stuff I was doing, and they wanted to incorporate ag ed classes into the summer school. They wanted to teach kids who are struggling in school about agriculture to help them get motivated to work on stuff, and to show them there's job opportunities out there for them in ag, because there's
there's a ton.
There are, I think, 7 million jobs or 7 billion. I can't remember. I think there's a lot of jobs in ag. They're not able to be filled right now. But yeah, so even having a center like that, some kind of center for troubled kids, or for adults who are looking to continue their education and don't want to go to COS, some kind of educational resource building that has vertical farming and kind of promotes community gardens, or just kind of community based agriculture. I think that'd be kind of a cool idea. Just kind of incorporate it more, that way it gets in their heads, and then they know to incorporate it on a larger scale later on.
Yeah,
because it's like you said, taking it step by step, planting that seed, that's what's going to see large results.
Yeah,
exactly. And no agriculture pun intended.
Right.
But that's the memo of this whole podcast, is to share agriculture.
We need this conversation started and going, and put that in, like you said, plant the seeds so then people know about it, and even if it's something small, I'll think about it, at some point, I still think about little things I learned about a long time ago. And, so I do think it's important that people know about this, because if people don't know about it, then what are we going to do?
Right. No, exactly.
Because I don't know if people look at, city growth like we do, kind of worrying about agriculture. I think it's great to build new things and create, more stuff for the economy, but, we also got to think about where we're going to get our food from.
Right.
We're not going to run out anytime soon, but at the same time, I don't want to underestimate how fast we can build things. Look at LA. How big that is,
Yeah, I mean, it's like we talked about time and time again. Always people are concerned about like GMOs or like some of the new tech that we're trying out, and they're saying like, if we don't have a food shortage right now, then why are we so worried about increasing our yields or getting more efficient with our farming? It's like, well, we only have 25 years to figure it out before we are going to have a severe food shortage. So why don't we figure it out now so we don't have that issue in 10 years?
Right.
And it's the same kind of deal with this. Like, urban development might not be an issue for Tulare right now. It might not even be a massive issue worldwide, but let's not let it become an issue before we find a solution for it. Let's have that stuff figured out now, and that way when we get there, we can find a way to do something about it.
Well, I got an idea for you. Let's not have people in LA tell us what to do. We wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
And that is the golden topic of the day. Let's have people who know about agriculture do all the talking about agriculture.
Wow, shouldn't that have been a thing, like, for everything?
You would think so. How about, people are, somewhat knowledgeable about the stuff they're voting on or making decisions on, but, that's just how the cookie crumbles.
Well, that's just how it's been set up, I mean, it's a whole bunch of people to kind of look at and say, well, why is this way, but...
Right.
That's, I guess, the beauty of our country is everybody can kind of...
But that also can tie into this, is that they ask these questions and no one can answer it for them.
Right.
So that's what we're here to do.
That's what we want to do,
I'm all for people from non-agricultural backgrounds having a place in agriculture as long as they're at least willing to learn about it or looking for the information about it.
Just like with anything, you don't want people talking about something they don't know about.
Right. Like, if people are like willingly like against, like they're like, what, like I'm completely against agriculture, I'm going to vote on every way to stop it, and like somebody like like my podcast or other ag podcasters out there go to them and say, hey, well, how about we have a conversation about this and maybe we can both learn something from it, and they say no, agriculture needs to die. Well, at that point, like, that person does not need to be making decisions in that category because they're not willing to learn about it.
The problem is those people still can, though.
Right, and that's the dangerous part about it. But
exactly.
I mean, I think that kind of pretty well sums up our Tulare issue.
That was just the main thing I've always been interested in and worried about, because, like I said, every time I go there, I'm like, well, there's another place being worked on, and that farming land's gone. Even near the 99 where they widened that road, that part of that was gone. They removed some more of that farmland, and it's only going to keep happening. When they have to widen 1 lane roads and to make it 4 lanes or whatever. So, but I mean, I feel better. I feel more hopeful that we'll be able to find out how to do something. But in the end, I can't really do anything at the moment for that. But I'm sure we'll have plenty of ways to how to make more efficient crops and regenerate soil and work it into our architecture.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of wraps things up. I do have a gift for you two.
Okay.
A gift?
Yeah, I know we're about a month after Christmas, but I brought you 2 gifts.
Okay, let's see what it is.
So, since we are moving past our Tulare conversation, and before we do, I'd like to give Coultin the chance to give his closing thoughts on that conversation.
Wait, which one?
The Tulare conversation.
Yeah, I gave mine a little early, but...
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting a closing statement.
I mean, you can save it for the end if you'd rather do that.
I mean, I can't really add anything with what Aaron said. I mean, it's...
Kind of feel the same way?
If I were to sum it up, I would say every house that we build on top of farmland is not... I mean, more than one mouth that we need to feed more, and tons more mouths that we didn't feed because that used to be a plot of land.
Right.
That house made a detrimental impact to our agriculture, and that automatically makes food prices go higher.
I agree.
I mean, that's off topic, but
that's a whole nother topic.
That's a whole other topic. Yeah.
But I mean, I guess if I have any closing statements for the Tulare conversation, since we're going around the table, similar to what you guys said, to have agriculture incorporated more closely in the urban areas would be a big goal of mine as well. And like you mentioned, for every farm we get rid of, we give maybe 5 more people somewhere to live, but we take away food from 500 people, and that's a conversation that needs to be taken more seriously. I think to add on to that, though, I would just say, at the end of the day, because this is an agriculturally education-based podcast, I would very much like to see this conversation be held in more households with more people across more demographics. No solution is going to be had unless we actually take the matter seriously and make sure that this conversation is not exclusive to the agricultural community. We get into this big old echo chamber of, yelling at each other about like, well, these people are stupid, they shouldn't be voting on this. Have you tried talking to them about it maybe? Like, we have all these people that are making these decisions that haven't heard from us. Why aren't we going out there and saying something to them?
And that doesn't just go for agriculture, it goes for everything.
Well, I was just about to say that. We need to know, proper political discourse.
Right.
When people ask, I actually had an issue with this today, which I won't go into depth with it at work, but, somebody was making a comment about something, and I feel like maybe they didn't like my answer, but I'm like, well, don't ask me something if you can't hear no about something, don't ask a question.
Right.
Or if you can't hear the opposing view on something, then don't, then I'm sorry, but don't talk about it if you can't handle to hear what's opposite. I think you should want to, because you want, and that's what I always try to look at when I'm angry at something or I'm arguing with something. It's like, okay, how can I be wrong? Or how, I like to look at, as well as looking at how I am right, how am I wrong as well? And then, if you learn something new and you realize that you're wrong, that's okay. That's not a bad thing. We need to remove that stigma of being wrong is bad, and we need to make sure that people know how to properly talk about things without being mad.
Because especially in politics, it becomes, if you can't have that conversation of okay, why do you think I'm wrong? Then it becomes well, I won.
Right.
And
it's
that's
not about winning. That needs to win together, not just by yourself.
It needs to be, okay, we made the best decision for the country.
Yep. Right.
We, not, I won.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah, if you're not making progress on an issue, then you are not winning anything.
No, you're not.
In all reality, winning in a debate or an argument or some kind of discussion, about politics is coming to a compromise. Like if you two can move forward on this is the best solution, then that's winning. Not okay. Well, I outsmarted you, so I win. That's just stupid. Yeah. But that's another conversation for another day. There's so many potential conversations. But I want to get to the gifts I have for you guys.
Okay.
So the gifts that I have are in the form of conversation topics, appealing to. hey! I'm a podcast
I know where this is
host. Going. Appealing to each of our interests, I have picked a topic that each of us have the ability to talk about briefly. Aaron, we'll start with you. Okay. Since you introduced yourself first on the show. I think you did. I don't remember.
It was Coultin first.
It was me, but let Aaron go.
Your name starts with A, so you're going first.
Yeah, there you go.
So, because I know Coultin's going to be...
I already know.
But, so... We talked about this briefly before, but since you're interested in vehicles and technology and robotics and all that kind of fun stuff, I want to introduce you to the topic of agricultural technology that we're seeing implemented bit by bit on the farm. So you know about the whole self-driving electric tractor thing we've talked about. What are your thoughts on the implementation of robotics, on AI, and on just like kind of self-driven and electric-powered vehicles on the farm?
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously, in terms of, I'm sure if they're implemented and they're done correctly, we can definitely increase efficiency and, lower costs for dairies, right? Like, say you have, automatic milking machines or, automatic feeding machines for cows, right? Instead of having someone, use a blade-in tractor, that just completely removes the variable cost of food, maintenance on the tractor itself, tires, and the fact that the person has to go and do it. I think just in general, automation and robotics and things like that, it's a great thing. My only thing is I feel like it gets kind of too far at some point, because eventually if robots and machines do everything, then what is our purpose? Because, because we've made them do a lot of things, right? And I don't think it's a bad thing, but at some point I'm like, well, how, are we going to lose all of our jobs? Which I see, obviously robots and things like that, they need maintenance as well. But what if we make robots to maintain those things? Right. That scares me, and I don't like the fact that humans becoming obsolete because of a computer being able to do it. I think it has definitely a lot of potential on the farm and on the dairy. It's great, but I just don't. It worries me about it going too far, and I don't know where that's going to go. Yeah. Eventually, if we remove all of our problems, then what's the point of even going outside or doing anything, going to work? And that's something that personally bothers me a lot. But I think in certain areas it works well. But I don't know. It's not gonna. I think if it's gonna be implemented, it's going to, and there's not really much that I can do. So I just don't know where it's gonna go. So That's my long explanation.
Yeah. I think to hopefully ease your worries a little bit. Yeah. First of all, like I mentioned, there's like way more ag jobs than we have people on this planet. So I don't think that the fear of losing jobs is something we're going to run into anytime soon, because we're always going to have ag jobs. So there's that. I think that, and plus, there's always like the fear of like, well, implementation of new technology is going to take away jobs, right? Like when we created the tractor, that took away a lot of jobs. It also made a lot of jobs because people had to learn how to drive it. The creation of the plow took away a lot of jobs, particularly in the form of cattle. But that's beside the point. But I mean, like having new technology, yes, there's going to be jobs that are taken out, but there's also going to be jobs that are implemented because you have to make up for the lack of of maintenance, like you mentioned, maintenance on those machines, and like now it's not you have to hire 4 tractor drivers. You hire one tractor driver and he controls all of them from a control panel.
Right.
So there's always, and like you said, there's the potential for it to turn into something more automated and more, robust and all this kind of stuff. But I would warn, and this is kind of my general statement for all of my ag tech based episodes, I would warn the idea that, farmers never run out of things to do, obviously. Yeah. It's more like, it's not necessarily like, well, we're gonna automate this part of the industry. That way, the farmer, doesn't have to do that anymore. It's more like we're gonna automate this part of the industry. That way, the farmer has time to focus on these other 10 things he's worried about today.
My only question is, what if they automate all of those parts that he has to worry about? Because technology moves very, very fast. And so I do. Obviously, I've watched a video on it, and it eased my worries. I haven't watched it in a while, so I need to redo it. But I know a lot of people are they are scared just like I am. But then I know some people are saying, well, it actually adds jobs the more things that you automate and whatnot. But, my only worry, like I said, is at some point, what if we do all of those jobs to where, automation automates itself? And, I don't know. That's the only thing that worries me, which is stupid, right? But in terms of its practical use, there's tons.
Yeah,
of course.
No, and I think that's a valid fear. I think that going back to one of the things we said way at the beginning of this conversation, though, people in agriculture love to struggle. So I think that no matter what we do, no matter what we automate, no matter what we introduce, there's always going to be another fish to fry. There's always going to be another challenge to overcome, just because that's the nature of agriculture. We're dealing with the natural environment. We can't necessarily automate everything because the environment has a way of saying, no, you're not going to do that. Like we have this robot that's like, perfect for picking oranges, goes out to pick oranges one day and a tornado picks it up and takes it away. Yeah. Like it's just, there's only so many things we can reach with the environment being such a sporadic factor, unless we completely move to a controlled environment for all agriculture. I don't think that's really possible with our current population rising and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, Coultin, do you have any thoughts on that particular topic?
Man, I wasn't expected to get picked on. Hold on. I don't think so. There's a lot of things, and this will also ease you. There's a lot of things that only humans can do. Like, I'm pretty sure they won't make a apple picker, because one thing that they, like you said, they use it in the lab and it's like, okay, this works fine. But then they put it out, this is a true story by the way, they put it out to do the real life test and they forgot to account that apples weigh something. And the machine, what it did was it mapped out where each apple was and it stuck with that location. So each apple that it picked off eased the weight from the branches, lifting the branches up. Well, the apples aren't right there anymore. So it's trying to grab something that isn't there. So there's some jobs that we still have to do.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think hopefully that eases your fears a little bit, but I think that again, conversation for another day. But
there's a lot of conversation.
Yeah, there always is with agriculture. Mm-hmm. But
I think the proper way to end off this piece is, like we were, like I said, we always talk about how, this is for another day, right? Mm-hmm. The more you learn about something, the more complicated it gets. So, I'm sure that, the more we advance, the more we're going to find out, life typically does not, it has a lot of ways of surprising you and giving you more problems that you originally didn't think you would have. Yeah. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that being said, Coultin. Yeah. Do you want me to go next, or do you want to go next? Do you want to end on a bang?
Sure, man.
Okay.
It's your podcast.
I mean, I don't know how long you're expecting to talk on your topic, but
depends. What is it?
Just don't talk about carbonic maceration.
Well.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Well,
this ought to be interesting.
So I'll go first. Well, it's up to you, Colton. You know what your topic is.
Okay. So, actually, Aaron, you would be surprised. There's not a lot to talk about.
Okay.
But, so carbonic maceration.
I think you have to preface this with why this is your topic.
Yeah. That was actually, I was going to start off. You didn't even have to tell me.
Okay, good.
This is my favorite words of wine. It is so carbonic maceration. That is just such a funny thing to say. Yeah, I just love saying it. But anyway, it is a very specific style of winemaking or vinification that is used. It can be used anywhere, but most famously used in Beaujolais, France. So typically, how everyone else, I guess, makes grape juice into wine, they press the grapes to get all the juices out, or other things, but I'm not going to get into it. They press the grapes to get the juice, and then they put yeast in it, or naturally, the yeast naturally gets put into it, which a lot of European countries do, and then that creates from the sugars from the grape into alcohol, and also heat and CO2 and other stuff, and then that creates the wine. But in Beaujolais, with carbonic maceration, they don't press the grapes at all. They put the grapes whole cluster into a tank or a vat, and they seal it up, and they fill up that tank with CO2. And CO2 causes the natural enzymes inside the grape to create the alcohol. So instead of creating the alcohol with the juice, it's creating it within the grape itself. So of course, with heat and the creating of gases, this causes the grapes to burst, and the juice falls to the bottom. And I forgot specifically how many days it takes, but it takes a few days. Then they open up that tank, let all the juice out, put it into another tank, and then they press the grapes to get the juices out in case those grapes didn't burst.
Interesting. But
it creates such a unique taste. You could be able to spot it out. It's like a sweet bubblegum flavor that only comes from Beaujolais, France. It's very interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
So I've been hearing Colton spout this word off for like a month now.
Well, it's a fun word, man.
It is a fun word. But
we've definitely had a lot of fun with it. Because it sounds so complex.
Maceration. But it sounds like it's a somewhat complex, subject. With anything with winemaking, it's going to be a very complex subject.
Absolutely is.
So I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of talk about, your passion.
I love talking about wine.
Yes, I could tell. But
we enjoy hearing you talk about it.
You
know a lot about it.
Thanks,
we might do a full episode at some point on the entire winemaking process, but that's again a topic for another day. That's like the catchphrase of this episode. But
Serious.
So very, very, very good. Thanks for that discussion about carbonic maceration.
Absolutely.
I think to close us off, I'll talk about my topic, xenotransplantation, another fun word that pertains to animal science. So we got our subjects. So as the name suggests, xenotransplantation, xeno meaning alien, transplant obviously meaning to put into a different place. It's the transplantation of an organ from a non-human species into a human. And you guys might have seen this on the news, I'm not sure, but about a week ago, the first ever successful transplant of a pig heart into a human was performed.
Wow. Did it work?
Yeah.
It worked.
Wow.
Yeah, he's still alive. He's still kicking. He hasn't had any issues. And the thing is, they genetically modified that pig's heart to be able to be compatible with a human, which is the first time that's ever happened. So genetically modified livestock is something that's not technically legal. It's not illegal. It just hasn't been done in a long time. We had a genetically modified salmon like 20, actually it's longer than that now. It's been like 30 years. We had a genetically modified salmon and it hit the markets, and ever since then people have been like, no, let's not GMO animals, let's just leave it at crops and we'll call it good. So we finally started doing it again, and they figured out how to genetically modify a pig's heart so that way it's not going to be rejected by a human body. And that is what happened with this guy. So I don't remember the full story. Basically it happened in Baltimore, Maryland. This guy, something about got into a bar fight and was having some kind of issues with his heart. I can't remember exactly what the story was, but yeah, they performed the surgery on him, gave him a pig heart. He's, there's been tons of news stories on him because, this is the first time we've actually been able to do this successfully. And to this day, he's feeling fine. I mean, he hasn't had, he's had like medication obviously to help his body regulate to the new heart, but like
that's like with every transplant,
right? Yeah. But it's it's been very very normal for a transplant. It hasn't had any weird issues. Obviously, he hasn't started oinking or anything. So, but I'm curious about what your guys' thoughts are on xenotransplantation.
Well, I think it's awesome because if we can have an easy way of quote unquote harvesting organs that could be used by humans, and it if that obviously I'm sure that pig was alive and well, so we can have an animal be fine, and then in that event that we can have a stockpile of parts that we could use for us if we need it. I mean, I'm very surprised that his body didn't reject it because I know someone in my family got a liver transplant and he has to take anti-rejection medications even though that piece of his that liver was a human, right? And it grew into something a new one. So I'm curious as to how that works. I'm really amazed that they got that working, but I'm hoping we can see more of that in the future. I really want to have like limbs, be able to like grow back limbs, or like especially eyesight. I would like die if I lost my eyesight. Things like that. I'm really hoping that we can make advancements in that, or somehow make it to where we can regenerate the brain from Alzheimer's or things like that. So definitely, I'm very excited to see that.
Well, little promotion on the new Spider-Man movie. He hasn't watched the Amazing Spider-Man.
I have not,
because that was brought up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's
Dr. Connors.
Right, his whole lizard spiel. Yeah, I thought everyone should be lizards.
So his thing was like, okay, I'm gonna genetically modify like whatever the serum to be part of a lizard, because when you cut off a lizard's tail, it regrows. So he wanted that genetics to be in him, so that if something gets cut off, it could regrow. And this man only had one arm. But that ended up making him a whole lizard. And,
obviously some issues happen with his
some
genomics,
issues.
But, so we haven't perfectly mastered genetic modification, but we're getting there.
Even in movies, we can't do it.
I'm sure we'll get there soon.
Yeah,
eventually. But I know some blind people, I think, have been able to get some of their eyesight back. Deaf people. So we're getting there. I hope that one day you worry about your arm somehow gets removed. You don't have to necessarily worry. You can eventually have it reattached, or somehow grow another one, or there's I don't know how they're gonna do it, but I'm hoping we see some more of that soon.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just got distracted. So I was looking up an article that I read a couple years ago about a Crispr cow. So they were trying to genetically modify beef cattle so that way they could produce more females that exhibited masculine traits. So that way you're still getting beef quality, but you still got moms. And I was just in the original article. I was looking for the name of the scientist who was leading the pack, but she was quoted in saying, "Our current understanding of gene mapping is like having in like 18th or like a 16th century map of the world in today's society. It's like we have such a little we have such a weak idea of how genes work and how to properly utilize them. Like we think we know a lot. We don't know anything about genes. Like we're still learning so much." Because one of the things that they were running into was they were trying to basically modify, the sex cells of this animal, and when they were turning on the masculine traits in the female genome, it was turning off something else, and so the two sex gene or the two sex cells wouldn't fertilize.
Right.
So they kept, they would conceive, and then nothing would ever grow. So, and they couldn't figure out why. So then they eventually figured out, okay, well, we must be turning something else off whenever we turn this on. And at that point, they hadn't figured it out. I was just looking it up. Apparently, they figured it out. So they know how to genetically modify cows now, which is huge. And it turns out, apparently, they created a tuberculosis-resistant cow.
Well, there you go.
So here's an interesting conversation. What if they were to modify like tuberculosis-resistant cows, but if they were able to get certain disease resistance in like pigs, for example, and then we xenotransplant some of those organs into our bodies, and now we're resistant to those diseases.
We need to find one for COVID-19.
Yeah.
And it is possible.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's some families where, like mine, where skin cancer runs in our family. So there's got to be something
that keeps getting carried to you guys.
Keeps getting carried.
Right.
A gene somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That keeps getting carried. So to be able to turn that off, to be able to turn off any cancer gene in there that gets carried on, it would be amazing.
Yeah. So as we kind of figure out more and more about genes and how gene mapping works, and as we figure more and more about like genetic modification and crossbreeding and all that kind of fun stuff, there's a very real possibility that we will reach a point in the future where we're able to, for one, transplant organs from, xenotypically transplant organs from different species that can be compatible with our bodies, but also we might be able to create some kind of resistance to most of the diseases and like you mentioned, cancers that we deal with, all the time and haven't figured out a solution to. Mm-hmm. So that could be really cool.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
So, well, it's a little bit on the animal science side. It's more of like a medical news update, but I thought that'd be kind of a cool topic to bring up. But yeah, so that kind of wraps up all the topics I had in mind. If you guys have anything else you'd like to add or any closing comments, feel free.
No, I think we touched up on basically everything I wanted to talk about. I think I learned a lot from this talking session, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a pleasure to be on your show, by the way. Thank you.
Well, to start off, in the 1730s, there was a wine disease called Phyllophora that took out 90% of the wine. No, I'm just kidding. That's true, though, but...
It's a topic for another day.
Did you hear something? I didn't hear nothing.
Oh, I didn't hear anything either. We're just going to close out the... But closing comments, Coultin?
Got none.
All right. Well, thank you, boys, for joining the episode. It was a lot of fun to have you on. I know we've been talking about doing this episode for... How long have we been roommates?
Dude, honestly, we've talked about it a long time. We've talked about it a long time. And I remember I went from... I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be on on his podcast. To now, and it's been a lot of fun. I think I'd like to do again sometime. So again, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and like we talked about, there are 1,000,001 topics to talk about in ag. So we can just make a list of all the things we said. That's a topic for another day, and we can make like episodes just off of that. So there is a lot to cover. But again, thank you guys for joining me. It was a lot of fun. Thanks to all the listeners for tuning in, and for all the hopefully you guys stuck around for all the strange conversation topics we reached at this point. But if you didn't, I don't blame you.
To be brutally honest,
I think they got to carbonic maceration. They're like,
oh my god, man, zero views.
It's like you can like see like how far into the episode they got. And, like that's the point where everyone cuts out.
I'm done.
Like they just hear carbonic maceration. They're like, nope.
Funny word, huh?
12,000 viewers.
But yeah, so that wraps it up for my end. Thank you guys again so much for joining me. Thanks to all the listeners so much for tuning in. I'll catch all of you next week. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.